She was just the nanny, or so he thought. After losing his wife, Daniel, a successful but emotionally distant millionaire, was left to raise his 5-year-old son, Caleb, alone. Grief made him retreat into work, relying entirely on Maria, the quiet, warm woman who had cared for Caleb like he was her own. He never asked much about her life. She showed up early, stayed late, and never complained. Caleb adored her. But one evening, as they sat at dinner, Caleb looked up and asked, "Daddy, why does Miss Maria always smell like soup and flowers?" It caught Daniel off guard. That night, something stirred in him, curiosity, guilt, maybe both. So after Maria clocked out and left, he followed her from a distance. She didn't head home. Instead, she walked into an old church on the edge of the city. What he saw next stunned him. Inside was a makeshift soup kitchen, rows of chairs, steaming pots, and dozens of people waiting. Maria changed into an apron and began serving with a smile that seemed to light up the room. Children ran to her, calling her Mama. Homeless veterans hugged her. She listened to each person as if they were the only one in the world. Daniel stood frozen. She wasn't just a nanny. She was a lifeline. Not just to his son, but to an entire forgotten community. He'd hired her to care for his home. But she'd quietly been restoring his heart, rebuilding his son's joy, and carrying burdens no one saw. That night changed everything. For the first time in years, Daniel stayed to help. And for the first time since his wife passed, he felt something like peace. All because of the woman who smelled like soup and roses, and saved them all. After losing his wife to cancer, Ethan Kensington, once a lively, driven tech entrepreneur, shut the world out. He buried himself in work, keeping his heart at arm's length from everything, even his 6-year-old daughter, Lily. Parenting alone overwhelmed him, so he hired Grace, a quiet and capable nanny, to help hold their crumbling world together. Grace never overstepped. She wasn't flashy or demanding. She simply showed up, every day, with calm hands, gentle laughter, and lullabies Lily clung to like lifelines. Over time, Ethan noticed Lily smiling again, drawing pictures of a happy home. He didn't know what changed, only that Grace seemed to be at the center of it. Then one rainy evening, Lily asked, "Daddy, do you love Miss Grace like Mommy would?" The question lingered. He didn't have an answer. So that night, when Grace said goodnight and left, Ethan followed her. He expected a bus ride. Maybe groceries. A modest apartment. Instead, she walked into a battered community center in a low-income neighborhood. There, Ethan watched her transform. She wasn't just Grace the nanny, she was Grace the mentor, the counselor, the late-night listener for troubled teens. She held a girl's hand as she cried. Hugged a boy who had just lost his brother. In a quiet corner, she knelt beside an elderly woman who called her, "My angel." It wasn't just service, it was love, given away freely despite the pain etched quietly in Grace's eyes. Ethan stood there, struck by the truth. Grace hadn't just helped Lily heal, she'd been gently stitching his family's broken pieces back together. And in that moment, he saw what he hadn't dared to feel since his wife died. A chance to love again. And a woman his late wife would have chosen, without question. After the sudden death of his wife, Charles Whitmore, a wealthy investor known for his sharp mind and colder heart, became a shell of the man he once was. He had money, power, a sprawling estate, but none of it mattered. His son, Oliver, barely spoke. His home felt hollow. Enter Elena, the soft-spoken nanny with kind eyes and a past she never shared. She didn't talk much, but she listened. She didn't push, but she stayed. And slowly, under her quiet presence, Oliver began to laugh again. Eat again. Sleep without nightmares. Charles noticed, but didn't ask. Until one night, curiosity got the better of him. He'd offered her a ride. She politely declined and took the bus instead. Something about that unsettled him. So he followed, discreetly, ashamed but compelled. She got off in a rougher part of town and walked several blocks alone. He expected a modest home. Instead, she entered a small building tucked between worn-down apartments, the Daniel house. He stood across the street, puzzled, until he saw the sign beneath it, in loving memory of Daniel Elena Ruiz, 2009 to 2016. Inside, she greeted children like a mother would. Hugged mothers like a sister. Passed out hot meals, read stories aloud, comforted crying teens. She didn't run the place, she was its soul. Charles couldn't breathe. He realized this wasn't charity. It was sacred ground, a place born of grief, shaped by love. Daniel had been her son. Lost too soon. And helping his son wasn't just her job, it was her healing. In that moment, Charles understood. Elena hadn't just saved Oliver. She was surviving too, with every bedtime story, every smile, every whispered "it's okay." Two broken lives, slowly rebuilding each other. Not through wealth. But through love that refused to give up. Jonathan Crane had everything, at least on paper. A tech mogul turned widowed father, he lived in a mansion filled with silence, except for the sound of his young son, Max, crying at night. Grief had robbed them both. So he hired Ava, a soft-spoken nanny with tired eyes and a heart that never wavered. Every night, Ava tucked Max in with a calm Jonathan couldn't replicate. She hummed lullabies, wiped away tears, and told bedtime stories Max now clung to. Slowly, laughter returned to the boy's world. Jonathan noticed, but never asked where Ava went after her shift. Until one night. Max had fallen asleep with Ava's hand in his. When she gently rose to leave, Jonathan watched her slip out the door as usual. But something gnawed at him, a sense that she carried more than she showed. So, for the first time, he followed her. She didn't hail a cab or drive home. Instead, she walked. Miles. Through cold streets and empty blocks, until she entered a small church with flickering lights. He waited, then crept closer. Through the stained-glass doors, he saw her drop her bag beside a rolled-up blanket, beside a worn-out mattress tucked in the corner of a hallway. No room. No bed. No home. And it hit him, the woman healing his son had nothing of her own. No warm dinners. No privacy. No space to grieve. She gave all she had to his family, while quietly surviving her own storms. Jonathan stood frozen. Ashamed. Awakened. And in that moment, something in him shifted. The next morning, he didn't just thank her. He gave her a room in his home. A key of her own. And a truth she'd almost forgotten. She wasn't alone anymore. Not after that night. Not ever again. To Julian Mercer, life was about control. After losing his wife in a tragic accident, he buried himself in business deals and boardrooms, anything to avoid the hollow ache left behind. His young daughter, Sophie, barely spoke anymore. So he hired Camille, a calm and capable nanny, to manage the chaos he no longer had the heart for. Camille was quiet, respectful, and never overstepped. She kept Sophie safe, fed, and gently encouraged. Over time, Julian noticed Sophie humming lullabies at bedtime, melodies he didn't recognize, but that seemed to soothe her soul. Still, he didn't ask. Camille never talked much about herself, and Julian never thought to pry. Until one evening, returning from a late dinner meeting, he drove past the town hospice on a quiet side street. Through a fogged window, he saw her, Camille, sitting with a group of elderly patients, a guitar in her lap, her voice carrying soft and tender through the room. He parked and stepped closer, unseen, watching in disbelief. She sang with emotion too deep to fake, songs filled with grief and grace. The patients watched her like she was sunlight. One wept openly. A nurse whispered, "She comes every Thursday. Lost her little boy a few years back." These songs were his favorites. Julian felt his breath catch. The lullabies weren't just melodies. They were memories. Her sons. Suddenly, Camille wasn't just the nanny. She was a mother who'd lost everything, and still chose to give. To his daughter. To strangers. To anyone broken enough to need her voice. That night, Julian saw what he hadn't dared to. His house wasn't just missing help. It was missing heart. And she had been bringing it back, one song at a time. He'd hired her to care for Sophie. But she ended up saving them both.